this is the project which was only begun when I just saw your call for papers. I had the idea for quite a long time, but then I decided to try to develop something connected to the some esoteric motifs which I see in Tolkien's texts. And I must say that alongside a strong Catholic Christian trend in Tolkien scholarship, there has always been another interpretational approach relating to the ideas of Neoplatonism and to a lesser extent Gnosticism and other esoteric currents, which can be considered as alternative religiosity. Doesn't mean like religion, but the feeling of the religious feeling which people might have, but not necessarily be part of some religious community. Tolkien lived during the time when different esoteric orders and societies thrived in Britain, and one of the Inklings, Charles Williams, was an influential student of the occult. Actually, he belonged for a while to the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. In my talk, I would propose to consider Tolkien's works as sharing some common motifs and ideas with Western esoteric tradition, in particular Gnosticism and Hermeticism. It might enrich understanding of Tolkien's text in partly explain certain tendencies in the interpretation. For example, there is an outright Gnostic retelling of the Silmarillion in the Russian fan fiction novel The Black Book of Arda, written by Natalia Vasilyeva and Natalia Nekrasova. And one might wonder how is it possible, but actually there are some ideas which can be developed in this Gnostic vein. And there is also a very interesting phenomenon of so-called religious affordance of Tolkien text, which allows the creation of new religious movements. And I would recommend you to see Marcus Altena Davidson's doctoral thesis, The Spiritual Tolkien Milieu, a study of fiction-based religious. And actually there are groups which take Tolkien's text as the gnosis, actually the hidden revelatory knowledge, and they base their you can say quasi-religious or religious systems on his text, using it as kind of scripture. And how and why these esoteric motifs appeared in Tolkien's Legendarium is a topic of a separate research, and as I told you, I have only started with it. So why doesn't it so somehow it doesn't okay. The starting point of my research on what else beside the Christianity might influence Tolkien's peculiar cosmogony and cosmology was the following quotation from John William Houghton's chapter in Jane Chen's monograph Tolkien the Medievalist. There he writes, Latin Christian thinkers in the actual early medieval period inherited the cosmogonies representing the desperate beginnings of their tradition in Jerusalem and Athens. On the one hand, they had the Hexameron, the story of 6 days' work of creation in Genesis. On the other, they had the Timaeus of Plato, the only one of the dialogues to have been translated into Latin, and that the only direct source for Platonic thought. As Tolkien first conceived of materials that eventually became the Silmarillion, the asterisk early medieval would have received in Ainulidale a third account of creation. So kind of like it fits quite well in this specific period of time, which Houghton calls early Middle Ages, but it also can be called late antiquity because the time frame somehow coincides very much. So there were trends which were already medieval, and there were trends which were still like late antiquity, and many things coexisted, like Christianity, Gnosticism, Hermeticism, and many other currents, esoteric and religious currents at the same time, and they influenced each other. But Houghton comes to the conclusion that had medieval theologians encountered the Ainulindale, they would have found its picture a double creation as music in the song of Ainur, and as fact in the word of Ilúvatar, reassuringly easy to fit into the schema of Augustine's Christian Neoplatonist synthesis. So in his chapter, he insists that there is no necessity to explain it outside Christianity. We should explain it through Augustine synthesis. And but we can see that the Neoplatonist interpretation is one of the leading approaches actually in Tolkien studies besides Christian Catholic, and it is exemplified in many texts of Verlyn Flieger, who rightly points out in the Interrupted Music, the making of Tolkien's mythology, that a quick comparison between Christianity and Tolkien's mythos reveals some fundamental differences, and not just on the level of doctrine of creed. Tolkien's is a far darker world than the envisioned by Christianity, and lacks the promise and the hope that the other story holds out. When talking about the Ilúvatar, she said that supreme godhead, Eru Ilúvatar, is neither the Judaic god of hosts who alternatively punishes and rewards his people, nor the traditional Christian god of love and forgiveness. Rather, he is curiously remote and, of the most part, inactive figure involved, save for one exceptional moment, in the world he has conceived. And it is remarkable that Neoplatonists had influence not only on Christianity, but on many other contemporaneous currents of late antiquity or early Middle Ages, among which are Gnosticism and Hermeticism. And Gnosticism had many variations, and these Tolkien's, it's interesting that I suspect that if there was asterisk late antiquity Gnostic who could read Tolkien's Ainulidale, he would find it also quite acceptable and quite possible text and type of religious thinking. And so besides, there already exist some Gnostic or even Manichaean readings, and Manichaeanism is a radical Gnostic system which proposes the existence of two creative powers. One is good, one is bad, from the beginning of the universe. It's not like in the Christianity that the God is supreme and Satan is like a lesser divine being. But in Manichaean system, the evil and the good, they are on par. Still, the good will prevail, but somehow the world is very dualistic from the very beginning. And you can find some readings in Top Ship is their Road to Middle Earth. He proposes there to read The Lord of the Ring from this perspective, especially the symbolism and the power of the One Ring. Then there is an interesting interpretation, also Gnostic interpretation in Bradley's Berzer's Tolkien's Sanctifying Myth, J.R.R. Tolkien's understanding of Middle Earth. And here he kind of like proposed also a very interesting idea to see the religious system taught by Sauron to the Númenórean as a Gnostic one. And actually he's very much right. I will just provide a quotation from his text later. And there is a very interesting article by Carol Fry, Two Musics about the Throne of Ilúvatar, Gnostic and Manichaean dualism in the Silmarillion, also, which kind of like researches the story of creation in this Gnostic and Manichaean vein, and it provides quite interesting insights. But Gnosticism is believed to be a very bad thing by some Catholic researchers, and till now, though their attitude to this current has changed drastically during the 20th century. But when we refer to Gnosis, it's kind of like there was Gnosis even in Christianity. And Gnosis is just esoteric knowledge of spiritual truths held by the ancient Gnostics to be essential to salvation. This is how Merriam-Webster dictionary provides it. But the term Gnosticism is a scholarly invention coined by the Cambridge Platonist Henry Moore in the 17th century, and he used it in the pejorative sense, which kind of like normally is understood. Gnosticism is normally understood is something really bad, still till now. In antiquity, the religious phenomenon it designates was simply called gnosis, from Greek word which means knowledge, or by its opponent, the gnosis falsely so called. This is how Christian critics call the Gnostic gnosis, because they also had the knowledge about the true reality, about true salvation, and they just were kind of like competitors in this religious field. And this connection, the word gnosis, does not refer to rational philosophical knowledge, but to religious, spiritual insight based on revelation. From the beginning of the modern world, Gnosticism has been used in particular to indicate a special brand of gnosis that flourished in the 2nd and the 3rd centuries, and what was vehemently combated by several early. This is what is written about the gnosis in the introduction to the Dictionary of Gnosis, published in 2006. And the so-called heretical Gnostics adhere to mythological Gnostic systems and were representatives of a much broader and variegated movement or type of religious characterized by a strong emphasis on esoteric knowledge, gnosis, and the only means of salvation, which implied the return of the divine to the one's divine origin. In simpler words, they knew some truth hidden from the ordinary people about the creation and organization of the universe, man's place in it, and the path to salvation from the imprisonment of the divine soul in the material world. And it differed from the Christian point of view, but still had a lot in common, especially among the so-called Christian Gnostics, because Gnostics were also very different. There were pagan Gnostics and there were Christian Gnostics. But what is kind of like very important difference, that it is not through redemption. The salvation comes not through redemption, but through gnosis, through the revelatory knowledge. So it's quite remarkable that actually Tolkien also has his own Gnostics as the people who know higher truth through their contact with the divine beings, and they are elves who have received their knowledge about the universe from the Valar and in Valinor, and they just like carry this knowledge through the ages. They live in Arda. In the Book of Lost Tales, the future Noldor have a name which has etymological and semantic affinity with the word gnosis, gnomes. But Tolkien was kind of like abandoned this name because it had some other connotations, in particular with the Parcells and Gnomus. They are elementals of earth, and he didn't like the word, so he abandoned it in the end. But still kind of like it has in common a lot in common with this gnosis, because really the elves are knowing people in his world, and they are the teachers of the humankind. And if we just talk about the Gnostic myth, there are a variety of myths, but we still can summarize it. It must be emphasized that there is no one myth, but an impressive amount of partly contradicting variants belonging to different Gnostic groups. Yet the most characteristic features are the so-called Gnostic mythology are. The first is distinguishing between an inferior creator of the world, a demiurge, sometimes it is even Jewish Yahweh, and a more transcendent God or order of beings. There are several beings at the so-called divine pleroma, like the Platonic one, like the Platonic, the one or monad. Then there is existence of a special class or race of humans that is descended from the transcendent realm and is destined to achieve salvation and to return to its spiritual origin. Sometimes they are believed to be the descendants of Seth, the 3rd son of Adam. Actually, it's quite an interesting story. Salvation is understood as a revelation that reawakens knowledge, gnosis, of the race divine identity, but not through the redemption due to the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ, and but through this like recollection of the truth about divine origin. And sometimes it's interesting that in Gnostic system, Christ is seen as one of the aeons, the divine creatures created by the supreme Godhead. And there is a sharp dualism involving a much more negative attitude toward the inferior creator God, the material cosmos, and the human body. And if we summarize the myth, which can be found in different Gnostic texts, so there is a transcendent God who is the Father, though sometimes he is androgynous, and he creates sometimes pairs, sometimes not pairs, just separate aeons who are his thoughts, and they represent some kind of like ideas, and who constitute pleroma or full perfection of the divine. They are kind of hierarchical family, but there is one aeon, sometimes this aeon doesn't have pair, sometimes has, called Sophia of wisdom, and she kind of like rebels because she also wants to create herself and on her own, and she's kind of like wants to do it either herself because she doesn't have a partner, or she doesn't want to create it with a partner and wants to create independently. And she does create, but her creature appears to be a very ugly kind of like dragon with lion head. You can see one of the pictures, depictions of this creature, and he's so ugly that she's scared of him and throws him out, expels from pleroma. But this creature, despite the fact that it's ugly and it's not kind of like good, it is divine, and it has power for creation. And when this creature appears somewhere outside of pleroma, he thinks that he's the only god, and he starts creating. He creates at first 7 archons, the planetary spirits, or some other creatures who help him to create the material world. So in this system, there is this divine world, pleroma, and this material world in which we live. And this is quite an unhappy place because it was created by ignorant and malicious creature, and not beautiful, what is also important, because all these pleromic beings, they're extremely beautiful, and this one is ugly. And but the world is not totally kind of like dark. It is rather gray, as it contains some reflexes of the true world. Sophia still manages to instill a divine spark into man. It's also an interesting story, and thus human nature becomes dualistic. We have this divine spark which must return to this pleroma, and we have this material body created by this strange demiurge. And to return to pleroma, people must receive gnosis revelation about their divine origin. So some motifs which kind of like can be found common in Ainulidale in the first place. The supreme transcendental god, the one created the Ainur, the holy ones, they were the offspring of his thought, and they were with him before aught else was done. And it is a very beautiful place, as we read in Tolkien, this the halls of Ilúvatar. There is the existence of 2 planes of reality, the timeless halls of Ilúvatar, like pleroma, yes, and it is a spiritual world for which probably human souls return after death. It's not revealed where human souls go, but very likely back to this pleroma of Tolkien. And the air as a created material world, but this world in Tolkien case is not entirely bad. And it's also grayish, but not that much gray in the Gnostic systems. There is rebellion one of Ainur, Melkor, for desire grew hot within him to bring into being things of his own, like Sophia does. But Sophia is not an evil creature, while Melkor was also not an evil creature at the beginning, but became one. And it's important that when inside of the created world, he also attempts at the creation of his own man orcs, actually. But as Yaldabaoth, when he creates man, he creates some body, but it's lifeless, and only when he breathes his divine spark, which he inherits from pleroma, into this man becomes alive. So even created as bodies, man needs to have this divine spark. The same with orcs. They are corrupted elves or man in different Tolkien accounts. It's different, but still they are of kind of like divine origin in this respect. And I don't know, they probably can be even saved. The creation of the material world by the Valar, though they are not evil archons, they are good archons, but still they create the world. Actually, it is created first as a project in music and vision, and then it is created in reality. But again, the creative power, the flame imperishable, comes from Ilúvatar. And the last motive, the marred state of air from the very beginning, because even in the music we have this interference of Melkor. And So, and it's interesting that there are also, it's mentioned in Fry's article, such as there are these Gnostic reflexes further in Akalabeth, such a state of universe and the presence of an evil divine entity in the world is inevitable. Inevitably leads to the attempt of this entity to tempt those who can be tempted, and in case of Tolkien's humans, not elves. And it's interesting how Bradley Brazier describes it in Sanctifying Myth, that just as the earliest man had been tempted with knowledge, so too were the Numenorians. I suspect that he refers to the story of Tale of Adenel, when the men were tempted once by Morgoth himself, who actually presented quite a Gnostic to them. Taken into the confidence of Numenorian, Sauron soon provided a Gnostic interpretation and reading of what was left of traditional Numenorian theology. Ilúvatar was the false god, the god of darkness, said the dark prophet and priest Sauron. Melkor was the true god, the giver of freedom to man. The wretched soul has strayed into a labyrinth of torment and wanders without a way out, ancient Gnostic writing teach. It seeks to escape from the bitter chaos, but knows not how to get out. In Tolkien's mythology, Sauron presents himself as a Gnostic savior, urging the Numenorians away from the labyrinth of Ilúvatar's time and space and toward the true god Melkor. It's quite really a very, very much Gnostic teaching which Sauron teaches to Numenorians, and we know that the Christians were very kind of like not happy with Gnostic teachings. Tolkien probably also was not, he didn't like Gnostic teaching. That's why probably, in my opinion, he introduces this teaching, but through in his creation, but through Melkor. So to say about the Sauron, the Gnostic streak never totally disappears, because Sauron continues it later in the Third Age from the text, and it can be found in Lothar, and Tonshipi quite exhaustively analyzes this Gnostic and Manichaean trends in his book. But there was another trend in these earlier esoteric traditions, and which kind of like persists till now. Gnosticism is believed to die out in that form in which it existed in the late antiquity, but Hermetism in the form of Hermeticism persists, and there is like this division because Hermetism is a specific historical form of Hermetic philosophy based on the works of revelation ascribed to the Egyptian god Thoth, Greek name Hermes Trismegistus, or Hermes the thrice greatest, and written in Greek and Latin, dating from the middle of the 1st to the end of the 3rd century AD, and it shares a lot of these Platonic ideas with Gnostic and Christian religious systems. But Hermeticism is a traditionally underestimated dimension of general religious and cultural development in pre and early modern Western society, very much based actually on this Hermetist texts, especially because they were rediscovered in the Renaissance times and were translated by Marsilio Ficino in 1463, and it were very influential texts during the Renaissance times, and still they are still influential in esoteric society. There was kind of like a scandal about Hermetic texts because one of philologists at the beginning of the 17th century told that they were not really ancient texts, but were written in the late antique period and are not true revelation of Hermes Trismegistus. But nonetheless, these texts still are very important and still influence certain esoteric concepts. They reinterpret them in a very different idea. And contemporary Hermeticism, it's quite interesting and eclectic philosophy and cosmology, which is based on Neoplatonic, Hermetic, Kabbalistic foundation, sometimes referred as Philosophia Occulta. And yeah, actually the Order of the Golden Dawn, to which Charles Wilson belongs, also is a Hermeticist order, not Hermetic in the true sense of the late antiquity. And I must here say that Hermeticists had much brighter outlook on reality. According to Hermeticists, the human mind was able to know God at least partially through the contemplation of the cosmos. Although the Hermetists recognized that the material world could wholly absorb the human being, the cosmos always remains for them the beautiful product, the first son of the supreme God. They could sometimes speak of the world as the plenitude of vice, but they never ascribed the origin of the world to an imperfect and evil demiurge. The way of Hermes implied instructions concerning the nature of cosmos with the help of all kinds of sciences, theories of space and movements, astronomy, which included astrology, medicine and music, and magic, and what is important, also music. Its aim was to make the world transparent towards God. So it was a really much brighter outlook, and unlike Gnosticism, it is a monist system, and thus it is closer to Christianity. There are no two creative powers. There is no this horrible demiurge. In many respects, it is a much more optimistic worldview, though the more pessimistic Gnosticizing texts also exist. Remarkable, the Hermetic teaching was even praised by some church fathers, like Lactantius and St. Augustine, as a pagan teaching which promotes the idea of Trinity and predicts the coming of the Savior. So now we will switch to some tenets shared by all Hermetic teachings, because there are several of them. And many of these ideas are described in the text, first text of the Corpus Hermeticum, which is called Poimander, in which a divine agent brings Gnosis to Hermes and shows him the vision of creation of cosmos, which is also, I don't know if Tolkien could read it. Actually, the English translation of Corpus Hermeticum, to which I refer, was made in 1906. So probably he could have read, because this idea of showing the creation in vision seems to me quite interesting. And so in Hermetism, God is invisible and entirely visible, and the visible world reveals the greatness of the invisible God. It's a pantheistic view. The world is God somehow. Still, it's different from God, but still it is divine. And the God is life and light. It's also, we can see reflexes in Tolkien's ideas that the Ilúvatar possesses life and light, and to start life, he must send the fire imperishable into the future cosmos. And actually, it's interesting that there is
Alexandra. I'm so sorry to interrupt. I just want, so we just want to make sure that we can move on to our next speaker on time. Can I give you a 2-minute warning just to start wrapping up so we can do your Q&A?
Yeah. I'm just like, it's like several, it's four other slides. So I just like want to say that if you just read that, you will see that there are some ideas which can be found in the in Ainulidale, and so but what is also important, in Hermetic tradition, there is no rebellion against the supreme God, though there is the desire to create, and everything happens out of love, though love is an ambivalent thing, bringing the divine anthropos to downfall into the material world and the consequent twofold nature of the human beings. A too great love for material world can lead a human being away from salvation. And in this respect, it's very interesting to consider elves as such creatures who are too much in love with the created world, and they cannot leave it for that reason. And in the Entry in Music and the Diction of Gnosis, Hanegraaff points out that in Hermetic literature, music is very commonly encountered in many different appreciations. This seems to be an important difference from Christian Gnosticism, for although both Hermetists and Gnostics must have been singing communities, the use of musical imagery and speculation in Hermetic literature is much more prominent than it is in Gnostic texts. As in the case with the view on the nature of the world, Hermetic appreciation of music seems to have differed. Further, he speaks of a fully worked out metaphor explaining the works of God, the tireless musician, in the term of the professional training and activities of a musician, which we can find in the text 18 for Corpus Hermeticum. Here I give you this quotation. And there is no mention of using using music to create the universe in Hermetic texts, but music imagery is present in many of them and is supposed to be a source of magic through the connection to the music of the spheres. So in such understanding, music is a source of magical interaction with the world, the same as in Tolkien's legendary music is not only creational, but also sub-creational power and the source of magic. And the image of the god as a tireless musician, for me, echoes in Tolkien's representation of his supreme deity as a composer and conductor of the choir of Ainur. And here are my conclusion. It can be concluded that man's religiosity in Tolkien's pre-Christian world tends to Gnosticism under the influence of the evil powers, while elven religious sensibilities can be called a kind of hermetic. Even their particular fall is rooted in their life for the world and its beauty, and it influences their nature. They cannot live harder even after death, and they do reincarnate. Nonetheless, elves are the race who have the gnosis. Yet there are humans who follow elven type of religiosity, like Numenorians before the fall, or the Dunedain, and share in elvish gnosis about cosmogony and cosmology. But unlike humans in the real world, they don't yet know about their posthumous fate. The gnosis is important for both races, though in man's case it vacillates from the true knowledge derived from the elven teachings to the distorted knowledge imparted on humans by Morgoth and Melkor. Thus, it is a monist system, or more precisely, henotheist, for the elven perspective, and dualist system for man. Tolkien moves as a devout Catholic. Tolkien moves his mythology toward a monistic Christian system, yet because it is a pre-Christian, even pre-Yahweh world, it contains a dualistic outlook as well. Thank you very much for your attention.
That was fantastic. Thank you so much for bringing that paper to us. Just before Tom runs the Q&A, I just wanted to pick up a question that was asked about how to follow our speakers on social media. So at the moment, so myself, Mr. Will Sherwood on Twitter, I'm doing a series of Twitter posts, and where I can, I'm including our speakers. So if you follow my Twitter posts, then you will find the social media profiles for our speakers. I'm now going to bow out. Bye.
We love him, don't we, folks? Thank you, Will. And thank you, Alexandra, for a fascinating presentation on some of these wonderful, fascinating resonances between Tolkien and Gnosticism. So I have a couple of really brief questions from the chat. One is from an anonymous attendee, and I think this might be a bit of a joke, but it's, hello, thanks for a great talk. My question, can the Black Book of Arda be found? I'm interested in reading it. I'm going to assume this refers to the Black Books of Carl Jung. So I think that's more of a comment than a question.
It's just like what I mentioned at the beginning, that there is a very Gnostic rewriting of Tolkien's Silmarillion in Russian fan fiction. It's called the Black Book of Arda. It's written from the point of view of Melkor. And at the very beginning, it appears that actually Iluvatar hides the true divine world from the Ainur, because when Melkor goes into the darkness, he suddenly goes through darkness and sees the big cosmos full of stars, not only one created world. And when he comes back, he questions the authority of Iluvatar, and then kind of like it's quite interesting development of the events. It is translated in English, but I can't tell you where you can find it. Probably you should Google it, because I was told by my Polish colleague that it is translated into English and into Polish probably as well. It's an immensely popular fan fiction in Russian speaking and like post-Soviet Tolkienist communities.
Brilliant. Well, I'm glad that you understood the reference, and I must have missed it when you made it in your introductions. So that's wonderful. Unfortunately, we don't have time for some of the other questions that came up, although she'll be able to answer those in the chat if she sticks around. So we'll move those over to you, and we are going to get set up for our next talk,